You manage things, you lead people. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I'm your hostess, Shamisa Ali. Good evening to everyone joining us on Facebook and YouTube. Hoping this December is filled with good cheer for you and your loved ones. Tonight's topic is rebutting malicious allegations of racism leveled against the government, problems of governance, including constitutional reform. The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the US, UK, Canada, the US, and the Caribbean. Funding support is by well-known philanthropist Dave Narayan from Dave West Indian Imports. Please welcome my moderator for tonight, Mahendra Hariraj. And of course, our panelist tonight is Mr. Shrad Kublal. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
Good evening, Shamisa.
Pleasure having both of you here this evening. She attended the University of Toronto, where she studied history and international relations. Receiving her bachelor degree in 1974, she later attended York University and obtained a Master of Arts in Political Science. She started her political career as the People's Progressive Party secretary in 1974. During that period, she was the Women's Progressive Organization personal secretary to President Chetty Jagan. Between 1977 and 1992, she was a member of the National Assembly. After a long tenure as MP, she was appointed Senior Minister of Health for the Guyanese government. She subsequently served as the Guyana Minister of Culture, Youth, and Sports. On August 5, 2020, she was appointed Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance by President Irfan Ali. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, the Honorable Gail Texeira.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to you, Shamisa, Mahendra, and Sharad, as well as all your viewers. It's a pleasure to be meeting with you from the warmth and beauty of Guyana.
Pleasure having you here this evening. Mahendra, go ahead.
Good evening, Minister Gail. It's truly a pleasure to have you on the program, and I know taking your time off from your busy schedule, we are grateful to have someone of your caliber on this program. But more pointedly, I think with all of the developments in Guyana and around the world, more in particular here in the US and the diaspora, we want to touch on some topical issues that I'm pretty sure our viewership and also members across the spectrum is attuned to listen to. And that is this malicious and baseless, in my regard, allegations or, peddling of racism that the government is entertaining. And I would love to hear your position and commentaries on that. And I also don't want to lose the opportunity for you to remind our viewership and also to talk a little about this frivolous lawsuit that maybe you were fortunate to be in a receipt of. So I will hand the floor over to you to make comments on this area.
Well, thank you very much. Guyana's gone through many trials and tribulations over long years. And I believe firmly, as a person who's been in politics for a long, long time, and one that has, had the honor to serve under Chetty Jagan, under Barra Jagdeo, under President Ramatar, and now most of all, President Irfan Ali, that our country has never, ever experienced what we're experiencing now in terms of development and the energy that this country has and the dynamism. And you see changes everywhere you go in terms of just a huge transformative agenda that's being rolled out. We have, of course, oil and gas, but that money, the real money for oil and gas, you're not going to see until about 2024. We are receiving money. And as you know, Guyana did a very unique and special thing globally. And that was when it signed the Art Treaty with Hess to be able to access over $750 million. This is Guyana really at this point. Before I get into answer your question, I have to preamble it because I believe the Avenue AFC has nothing to offer the Guyanese except division and to use color and the color of your skin to be able to separate people. that in fact the Guyanese people of all races are energized and are seeing the country moving forward, seeing change. Over 1,000 community roads are being built, for example. 11,000 house lots being built, for example. The new specialty hospital for women, mothers, and children. The programs to rehabilitate and create new hospitals across this country. The Demerara Harbor Bridge. It just goes on and goes on. So that in that context, I think we have to put the allegations that the APNU is making in that context of what is happening in the country right now. And so there are many allegations they're making. You know, they say this is apartheid. Well, those of us who struggled against apartheid in South Africa know that there's no such thing as apartheid in Guyana. Apartheid basically means state-sponsored and state-instituted racism. That does not exist in Guyana. Secondly, we have a constitution that enshrines human rights and in fact has an anti-discrimination clause that is very broad in the areas that you're prohibited from discriminating against persons in the administration, in the executive, and in the judiciary, for example, in the legislature, so that anybody who feels they're discriminated against can go to the courts on a constitutional motion. There's a constitutional court. You also have the Constitutional Rights Commissions of Women and Gender Equality and Ethnic Relations, Indigenous Peoples Commission, and the Rights of the Child Commission. These are all bodies that are there to provide an avenue where persons may feel discriminated against. When one asks the opposition, well, facts, what are the facts? I listened to a program recently put on by Paul Slow, Enrico Wolford, J.H.K. Lal, and Nigel Hughes. It was so bad. It was so bad. One felt totally nauseated by the accusations, which are totally fictitious. In fact, in their haste to say that so many contractors, that the number of contracts being given were dominated by Indo-Guyanese, that they named companies that are actually headed by Afro-Guyanese. The country right now, in terms of the accusations, they can only go and talk abroad. They can only talk in New York. They can only talk with the congressmen and women who wish to listen to them. But in Guyana, whilst they say this on the Facebook, they say this in the media, no one's really taking them seriously. Because everywhere you look, and I'll just, if you'll allow me, give some examples, because in contrast to what we're doing, the APNU AFC was in power for 5 years. Assuming what they're saying is that Afro-Guyanese are marginalized, and therefore they were righting a wrong that the PPP had done between 1992 and 2015, why is it that the programs they came out with hurt all Guyanese, but in particular Afro-Guyanese who supported them? And let me give you some examples. The draconian taxes that were brought in, the 250-odd taxes, which made life terrible for Guyanese and harmed the business community terribly. You also had the distribution of house lots. When we were in government, almost 10,000 house lots were distributed annually, and we've gone back to that now in 2022. But they were giving out 4,000 house lots, if that many, on an annual basis for the period. What they were more anxious about doing was giving out state lands to friends and cronies, particularly those who financed them. And so the APNU legacy and AFC legacy in office is one of, yes, they did distribute land, they did distribute house lots, they did distribute contracts, but to whom? And these were given to a very small elite of Afro-Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese, because there are certain companies that finance them that did extraordinarily well. But the majority of the Afro-Guyanese and all of the rest of Guyana suffered as a result of their regime. And so in contrast with ours, that you can go from, and it's a long list, and I can come back to that if you like, but the whole COVID relief, we took over in the midst of the COVID relief when the country was in shutdown. The government didn't even have masks that they'd bought for the population to distribute to the health workers, the PPEs for the health workers, who were majority Afro-Guyanese, by the way. The fact that the majority of police and GDF and fire and prison in this country, again, majority Afro-Guyanese, were left unprotected in the COVID, at the same time while the elections was being dragged out for 5 months by the AP and UFC to prevent the declaration of the results. This hurt who? It hurt all of us of Guyana. But on coming to office, we brought in COVID relief to all the households of Guyana, received $25,000. We also gave a second layer of COVID relief to the riverine communities in particular, that is now coming to an end now. We also distributed to the flood relief. We had a terrible flood in last year, but in fact for 2021, the majority of the year has been rainy and there's been floods in many parts of the country, and particularly in the interior for the first time. The cash care program that was given to children who are registered in school. And I can give you the figures for that, because where do we find the discrimination? How do we talk about discrimination when we have figures that show that the majority of children who were able to get the cash care program was in 2021, 187,000 children, 857, all children registered in all schools in Guyana, private and public. So we could not have left out children who are Afro-Guyanese. In 2022, 196,000 children, and 196,022 children received the cash care program of 25,000 and 5,000 for the school uniform voucher. When we go to the housing program, 11,000 house lots given out. 44% of those are women. And if you look at the photographs of the various events that are held in Region 2 and Region 3, and all over the country, Region 10 and so on, and Region 9, you will see various peoples of various colors that are there. And then you also have even the training programs, because we need more and more skilled people. The GOAL program, which was designed and works with universities in Germany, India, University of West Indies, and University of Guyana. In the first year, we said in 5 years we would give 20,000 scholarships. We are now in the second year and we're at 11,000 scholarships being distributed. In 2021, 4,271 scholarships was given out. This is for anything from certificate to PhD, including all online. 31.9% male, 68.1% female. The same thing when we come to 2022, over 7,000, again, women in the majority. If we go to the GROW program, which is to help people who never finished CXC, never finished high school, so they can get what they call the Americans, I think you call it a GED, is that what you call it? That the number of children and young people and adults was 3,139 for the year of this year, 2022, because that's when we started. Again, 21% male, 78% women. So something's going on in this country with the women in this country of all ethnic groups who are trying to grasp at every single opportunity to get skills. And they're all ethnic groups. Again, in these programs, we see the majority of persons are female. When we go to, as I said, the cash care is for children, regardless. When we go to what they claim are the contracts, that the contracts are marginalizing Afro-Guyanese. And I need to explain to your viewers, Guyana has very strong constitutional provisions to do with anti-corruption as well as procurement. And so we have procurement legislation. For the first time in this country, there are over 1,000 new small contractors that have been established, being created, getting their business registration from every part of Guyana. All the puppets being done, the small works being done in communities is not being given to contractors outside, but being using and developing skills of those people in the communities. They are business registered and they're doing the majority of work at the municipal level in Georgetown, for example, the neighborhood democratic councils, and in the community levels. When they talk about discrimination in contracts, first of all, there are small contracts that ministries are allowed to have that are basically service contracts, and these go through a ministerial tender board. And they also then have to go to national tender board. You have the regional democratic councils have their tenders, and they have their own tender boards. Then you have the national, which goes to cabinet. Any contract that is over 16 million goes to cabinet, but the Procurement Act does not allow the cabinet to award a contract. The award is given based on the recommendation of the National Procurement and Tender Administration, which is made up of business community that are appointed by the Private Sector Commission, professionals in the public service, for example. These go to cabinet, and cabinet is only allowed to give a no objection. If cabinet has a problem with it, it's sent back to be reviewed if something looks wrong with it. And if the NPTAB brings back the tender and says, it's fine, cabinet hasn't got a choice. So the issue of what contracts are they talking about? In Region 9, the majority of small contracts are given to people in that region. The same thing with all the other regions. And so cabinet, for example, in this year, and I'll just give you figures, in 2020, when we just started, in the last 3 months of the year, 351 contracts were awarded with a no objection. 2021, 1,608. In 2022, 1,790 awarded with no objection. And so coming over almost 4,000 contracts that are awarded by cabinet. But there are hundreds and hundreds of contracts that are awarded at the various levels of local government, regional democratic councils, and state entities as well. So that this whole area, that's somewhere along the line, that there is this wicked bunch of people who are deliberately choosing people based on ethnicity to get a contract for work. You, Mahendra, you're an accountant and all of that. You know very well that in tenders is something called responsive and non-responsive tenders. There's criteria. The law says what you have to provide. If you don't provide the information, you get knocked out and the tiers go on, and you go to the lowest tender for those who have tendered. Now, under APNU, there's certain contractors who I think you know who they are, big contractors, who hogged all the work. Not only did they want the billion-dollar jobs, they took all the little jobs that are $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. They took away work from ordinary poor people and ordinary small contractors. And there was no problem with this. And the cabinet got into trouble by awarding a contract for the Demerara Harbor Bridge, a cabinet, not ours, awarding a contract for the Demerara Harbor Bridge, which was an absolute scandal, where the company didn't even bid. It never bid. They shocked out 30 companies that had bid to put in one that knew the minister well, or appeared to know the minister well. And the contract was awarded. And so this led to the Public Procurement Commission, which is the oversight body, a constitutional body, saying in a report that the cabinet had unauthorizedly awarded a contract and that the minister had acted unlawfully to take a contract to the cabinet without approval. That minister, by the way, is before the courts for a range of charges for corruption, including use of state resources, sale of state resources, as are several other people. We say to the APNU AFC, show us where. Give us the examples of where people are being marginalized. You cannot say that in a country that is multi-ethnic, in which not one ethnic group is in majority, that is majority meaning 50% and over, right. Not one ethnic group in Guyana is over 50%, that somehow Indo-Guyanese mustn't get anything either? Right. Is that what you're saying? Are they saying Amerindians mustn't get anything either? And how do they know just by name? My friend referred to 50 years ago. When I was growing up as a child, you saw a name Passad. You know Passad was an Indo-Guyanese. You know Brown was Afro-Guyanese and a Texeira was Portuguese. 30, 40 years later, it's not the case.
Right.
There are Texeiras that are Afro-Guyanese. There are Passads that are mixed, as we say, Douglas. The world has changed. Our people have changed the way we live our lives, and you cannot reduce us to the level of what is expected to, and put us in little boxes as to what our ethnicity is.
Right.
What is wrong with a contractor, regardless of what his ethnicity is, his or her ethnicity is, getting a job based on providing the requirements and specifications and the financing to be able to do the job? And if they don't do the job well, they will be terminated and we go to tender again and we bring up another contractor as required by the law. But one cannot, and it's unacceptable in a multi-ethnic society for a political party to be so highly irresponsible, to be dredging this up all the time about ethnicity.
Right.
Every Guyanese, regardless of their ethnicity, have a right to live a better life, a right to have water, a right to have housing, a right to be able to have their children go to school and do well and be supported. The fact that the president has given out for the first time $100,000 support for children with disabilities when we had no database on children's disabilities in our country. We now have a database with thousands of children between the ages of early birth to 18 years old who have a disability, and each one of them got $100,000. Each one of the families got to take care of them. And they're now on the permanent register to do with public assistance. Fishermen getting support, small fishermen getting $150,000 to help them in the period of COVID. When you give cane farmers $250,000 support to be able to deal after COVID and the flood. When the miners are given support so that, again, COVID and floods and everything else, they're able to get back on their feet. Now, when I call those categories, these are all different races,
right,
all different ethnic groups. When the president decides a week or two ago to give the GDF, the Guyana Defense Force, the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Fire Service, increases the discipline services in the totality, increases in their salaries. This is outside of it, and in addition to the 8%. 8% was given across the board to public servants and persons working in state corporations, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
The majority of the discipline forces are Afro-Guyanese. And yet in 1966, the International Court of Jurists pointed out, after the violence in the 60s in Guyana, that the fact that the discipline services, and that was just the police and the militia at that time, were not ethnically mixed was a problem.
Right.
We have made over and over efforts to have other ethnic groups join the discipline services. And slowly, very slowly, because of discrimination, because of religious insensitivity and sometimes discrimination, Indo-Guyanese and Amerindians and other ethnic groups didn't want to join. Over time, those people have been joining these discipline services. They're reaching the level of inspector and assistant commissioner, whatever. And all of a sudden, Paul Slow, a former assistant commissioner and former head of the Police Service Commission, makes it a big deal that you now have Indo-Guyanese who are commanders of 3 or 4 regions of Guyana. And we must say, why not? Why aren't they allowed? Why is it so unacceptable for Indo-Guyanese to be a commander in one of the police divisions?
Makes sense.
I think it is. And the reason why it didn't happen before, Mahendra and Shrad and Shamisa, the reason why it didn't happen before is because within these institutions, there was prejudice against Indo-Guyanese. We have to start calling a spade a spade. So I'm sorry to get excited, but I wanted to try and paint as broad a picture as possible for you to be able to see this issue that APNU is, as we say, gote. You know what gote means, right?
Yes.
Minister, I'm happy. I'm happy that you provided.
I assume our listeners remember who are in the diaspora what bote means.
Right.
That
if I may interject, I mean,
yes,
the context you have provided us illustrates your familiarity with the history and the command of the politics of our country. But what I want to ensure that our viewership clearly takes away from this, in a summary perspective, you have basically nullified this allegation by showing evidential facts based upon the statistics that this narrative of racism is basically baseless and just a figment of the imagination that a group of folks are holding on to peddle perhaps the last card remaining in their politics.
it's more sinister than Mahendra. It's more sinister than that. It's more sinister. It is, as you correctly said, the last hurrah of the APNU AFC. It's all they have left. And they're being abandoned by their supporters, regardless of what race their supporters are. But the issue is, this is what they're going to cling to, and also because it's sexy when you raise it in international forums and you raise it with their friends in the Congress. Right. Because we all know in the United States, the level of racism that exists in the United States against all different colors, not just Black Lives Matter. But one point I didn't raise about you was to do with my so-called lawsuit. It is quite funny, actually, to receive a letter threatening to sue me for $500 million, which I've never seen in my life, and would never see in my life, and don't wish to see in my life. But so my lawyer wrote his lawyer, because you can't sue anybody without having an address. You have to have an address, and Mr. Rickford Burke does not have an address in the United States. He's undocumented, it appears. And so he has no address. So one, how do you sue someone when you have no address? Secondly, if he wants to sue me, he can come to Guyana. He's welcome to do that. And I'm sure we will be waiting for him with open arms. Deal with a number of charges he has against him right here in Guyana.
I just want to make a comment on,
I don't know if a suit will come, but we'll see.
Minister Gail, I think it's a good segue with what you have said to Kublal. But let me just add one commentary to that point. You had said in the media that it's a one-man show, but apparently it's a one-man show also without an address at this point.
Yes.
So Kublal to make his contributions and also to ask two questions.
No, I want to comment on this discrimination that is being peddled by the opposition. What are they saying, that within the APNU, there's no Indians? It's only Africans? Because everything they say is African is being discriminated against. What happened with the Indian supporters within the party?
Well, they seem to be falling apart. They seem to be falling apart because if you listen to the program, JHK Lal was the biggest proponent of the allegations of racism, and was probably most vicious of in total, like all of them. But it's a question, I guess, of who they feel butters their bread. But they have their own internal issues, and we'll see how it unravels. But the Guyanese people just want to get on with their lives. And so the training programs, the job creation, it's quite amazing in our country to see men working at night with lights on roads, on building the new maternity hospital and working in the housing schemes. Our people want in that kind of mindset. But there's money to be made, there's jobs to be had, and we're trying to train people and to train them better, so they'll be able to have a greater opportunities, greater mobility, greater salaries, and obviously the whole area of developing the skills in the hospitality sector, the whole amazing changes taking place in agriculture and tourism and so on. So at some point, we may not have enough people to do the kind of things we're doing, and that's going to be an interesting challenge for us.
Thanks, Minister. Kublal, you have your question.
I want people to understand what the PP government has come from. So could you give us the state of government was like when the PP took office in 2020, so that people can understand where we are now and see the comparison?
Well, in 92,
Not 92, just
we were
go back
one.
to 2020.
Oh, 2020 you said beginning.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I mean, from 1992 we were the one of the poorest countries in the hemisphere between Haiti and Bolivia. And by 2006 to 2011, that's when we really started to manage to, with all the debt that we carried, that we inherited from the PNC, that you began to see visioning taking place that wasn't just trying to meet the conditionalities of the IMF and the World Bank and IDB. And so the low carbon development strategy, the housing programs that were starting to emerge and grow larger, all the different programs you talked about, a mile is fall to have cheaper electricity, the connectivity issues to connect our country, which was not and still is not, but it's much further connected than before. That these were the visioning that was taking place up to 2015. And so I remember when we demitted office, there was no announcement that oil had been found. It is after we demitted office, whether that was known before or not. We did not know in government. It is when Abnu Granger got in that the oil companies announced that they had found oil, and then we know where we've gone from there. But right now, Guyana is playing an important and unique role globally. And I think that part of the pride and dignity of us as Guyanese, regardless of our ethnicity, is that our country is out there on the global and regional platforms to do with food security, do with climate change, to do with how do we deal with carbon credits and being able to make innovations and unique solutions as a developing country to our trouble by using our resources, such as the fact that Guyana is one of the largest carbon sinks in the world. So the level of innovation and how do you say, problem solving for us, the people. We were dependent all the time on consultants, all being tied to loan agreements. I'm not saying we don't have loan agreements now, but the point is that the innovation and the vision that's coming with our country is being driven by Guyanese, driven by the president, driven by Jagdeo, driven by leaders in this country to see Guyana become a model country globally. And it may sound far-fetched because we've always been so far down at the bottom that we never thought we could ever be anywhere else. And so there's a different mood in the country, a different way in which we're looking at ourselves. That doesn't mean we haven't solved all the problems. Of course we haven't. We haven't solved all our social issues. We have many issues to address. But the fact is that people are seeing change. People are seeing things happening. The diplomatic corps constantly says, we don't know how you ministers are going like this. You're going at an amazing speed. They ask about the president. How does he keep up? Because you're driving this process so that people will have greater trust in their elected officials, trust in the government to be able to move this country forward. And so Mr. Norton can fiddle diddle and talk and complain, but he hasn't put one fact. There was a role, in the past with MPs from the opposition. They would contact by phone or whatever the ministers of government in our government and make representation for people. This person has got their old age, this person got their NIS, this person's in a bad way, this farmer has some issues, etc. From Granger time, that had to stop. No social engagement between opposition and government was allowed. And when Granger came in, that became a pact. It was not allowed. And so he has damaged irreparably the engagement that normally takes place even under bad times in Guyana between the opposition and government. So opposition MPs are fearful to ask a government minister to represent a person, to help a person. That's what we're there for as ministers, to help resolve problems. Who says the bureaucracy is always right? But they're not allowed to do that. If they do that, they're shamed. When you have a leader opposition says, I am not going to shake hands when he's referring to the president. I will not shake hands with my oppressors. And another MP, Mr. Figuera in Linden, president comes to visit, automatically you stretch your hand out and you shake the president's hand. And of course, he was criticized for that.
It was cold, right?
You know, so I mean, it is a situation in which you have major contradictions. A country that's moving forward, a people, regardless of what race, that want to move forward, and you have an opposition that's somewhere lost in time, in some time a time warp, that is playing to a gallery that is mostly external and with a small bunch of acolytes. The rest of Guyana is just getting on with it. You know, in the local government elections, part of what I believe is their concern about the list. And as you saw today, the date for submission of the list of candidates has been cancelled. And the GCOM will be advising us as a people of what's going to happen next.
Right.
But we know that he's been going to communities looking for candidates to put on the local government elections. He's having serious problems. Some people ain't even turning up to the meetings where he goes.
Right.
So he's out of touch with what is the mood and the spirit of what Guyana is right now and the Guyanese people are right now.
Right. Minister Gail, I'll ask my colleague Kublal to contribute one more remark before we segue into...
I would like you to comment or expand on the state of constitutional reforms in Guyana.
The constitutional reform, as you know, we passed the bill.
Yeah.
And that bill has been assented to. The Constitutional Reform Commission, will be appointed after we finish the COI. As you know, the COI on the March elections has been going on, and the same facilities will be used to put the Constitutional Reform Commission into that has been financed, and so the COI is bringing out revelations every single day, and I hope that some of your viewers and you yourselves have the opportunity from time to time to look at the evidence that's coming out in the COI. As you know, you may know that some of the members of staff of GCOM who have been charged with fraudulence and conspiracy to defraud in regards to the elections approached the courts on Monday afternoon to injunct the Commission of Inquiry on the elections. And the case was dismissed and thrown out yesterday afternoon by the judge. So that these are important developments in terms of the March elections. And so the the Constitutional Reform Commission will be up and running as soon as we finish the Commission of Inquiry, which has a limited time. But if there are delays like this going into the courts, it could take a bit longer than what was anticipated.
All right. Is the government considering collecting data on ethnic distribution of house lot or jobs or contracts? Because everything you see coming out, as you mentioned earlier, is that people, the Afro-Ghanaians are getting nothing. So, like scholarship, this gold scholarship, government scholarship, could the government come up with statistics to show that is equitably distributed? I'll just comment on that aspect, because that is one of the biggest issue that the opposition is heckling now.
One has to wonder if they would accept any data we produced in the first place. But the issue of what ethnic data do we collect and where do we collect it? In the Ministry of Health, data is collected for every person who is born, every person who dies, every person who is sick. because it's in terms of looking at health patterns, disease patterns, body identification, etc., etc. So the only institution that collects ethnic data is the Ministry of Health, and for epidemiological purposes. Secondly, the police collect ethnic data based on persons they arrest or bodies they find or persons who are injured, and that is it. We do not collect ethnic data, and this would be an issue I believe the Guyanese people would have to determine whether that it is something that we would have to talk about as a people and to consult about. Is this what we need to do? The mixed population is getting larger. The Armenian population is the fastest growing population in the country, moving from 5% in 1992 to 11% in 2021. And so the demographics are changing in our country. We also have a large group of migrants from Venezuela who are indigenous and Guyanese descendants, as well as Venezuelan nationals, like the Waraos, who are indigenous plus Venezuelan nationals. So we have a large percentage of persons who are in the country that are migrants, whether they will stay or not or go back to Venezuela. One can't tell at this point. You have Haitians, you have Nigerians, you have Cubans, you have Indians. We're a kaleidoscope. But we have not collected ethnic data. And I wonder sometimes, and this is just something I think is very strongly the Guyanese people would have to determine that. And if they so wish, then that will be done. If they don't wish it to be categorized based on ethnicity, and I think it's not a helpful or a healthy approach. The government and the president's own vision is one of one Guyana, where we can, as Guyanese, regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of what we look like, that this is our country. And so one day we'll have to see whether the Guyanese people want this or not. But however, it's funny that you asked that question, because actually in Guyana, that's not a question being asked. It is not a question that's being proposed even by the opposition, as far as I remember, because obviously if it was, and they did propose it, that the data would show that they, as you said, Mahendra, these are fallacious allegations. They have they can't stand by themselves. They can't. They're refutable and easily refuted. And so there's something that in the constitutional reform could be looked at, or as a national consultation. But we do have to talk about race in this society. Afro-Guyanese, by the way, who have been members of the PPP from the 1950s and 60s, have been the worst victims of PNC targeting and abuse and violence. Not Indo-Guyanese, but Afro-Guyanese who dare to belong to the People's Progressive Party. So too, the members of the Civic, who are part of the PPP civic government, have been targeted historically by the PNC for, as they're saying, being traitors to their race. So right. This is the mindset of the APNU. Right. So you have to be careful to what you call find solutions that are actually playing into the game of APNU and PNC.
Minister Gail, thanks for that remark, and I think Kublal, a lot of context there as for data. And Minister Sonia was on the program as well and related a variety of facts and also on the goal and the scholarships. But it would be remiss of me not to ask this question in respect to the international relationship that Guyana has across the spectrum. We know heckling is coming from one area of New York about racism and these allegations of racism. But it seems the government is so welcomed in all of the international forums. And I'm going to couple that question with one of the topic areas tonight about problems in governance. Given that your portfolio is on governance and especially the parliamentary sort of area, how do you navigate this, challenge with respect of a group of individuals who are there to serve the people, but seems they have a different agenda?
Are you talking about parliamentarians? You're talking about the diaspora in
Well, first, what is the relationship the government has for clarity with the government? What is the relationship like? Maybe inform us about, we are hearing about these allegations, and there is collaboration with a few individuals here in the Congress and in specific areas of New York. But in general, it seems the government of Guyana has a wonderful relationship with foreign governments, foreign dignitaries.
Yeah.
That, can you comment on that? And secondly, with respect to the governance of Guyana, how do we bridge, or how do we cross that road at any point in the foreseeable future when you have a set of individuals seem, as you said, are stuck in time? How do we cross that barrier?
Well, let me take the first one first, and that is that Guyana's profile, obviously helped by oil and gas, has never been as high as this in the International Regional Forum. But not just because of oil and gas, and because of very forward-thinking and innovative thinking by the President, Irfan Ali, in the programs and the issues to do with zero hunger, the areas of climate change, particularly with Irfan Ali, President Irfan Ali, and Vice President Gail. These are very, very critical international issues. And so at the CARICOM level, Guyana's leadership role in working with the other CARICOM countries, but Guyana's has taken back its leadership role in the CARICOM. It plays a role in the OES. It is welcome as a country that everybody asks what is going on, how things happening, and they want to be able to come to visit. The number of investors, the number of visitors to Guyana in terms of also foreign dignitaries and representative government, the number of trade missions that have come in from the UK, from Canada, and even from the region, Barbados and Trinidad and so on. So that is because we're trying to be able to share our experiences and the fact that resources we have and learn from other countries. The president's visit to the Summit of the Americas and the relationship with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, with the CARICOM countries, but also with Guyana. These are important, particularly when Guyana is taking a key role in one of the areas that was agreed on at that meeting with CARICOM leaders and Biden and President Biden, in what were the three areas they're going to work on. And Guyana is in the lead in one of those areas. So that, I think, we're proud to be there, and we're proud to give the leadership, and we're proud to be part of a process that will build better relations with other countries. Of course, too, that we were at the World Court recently with regards to our border issue, and so that too will go its own course as required by the World Court in The Hague, and then the issues you're raising to do with governance. The country, the issues of people having trust and confidence, people's trust and confidence was damaged during the period of Granger and also during the election period. So there's work to be done to ensure that people trust that institutions work. So if they have NIS, they have public assistance, they apply for a house lot, they apply for a job, that they will be treated fairly and equitably. And that is the trust we're trying to build back by looking at how we're dealing with training, how we're dealing with house lot applications, trying to deal with what was a backlog by the APNU of 68,000 house lots. And yet we are continuing to take in applications, but we're trying to finish that backlog that the PNC had and work simultaneously on the ones that are coming in now. So we're addressing a number of thousands of cases where people applied in 2015, 2016, and right through and never got. And of course, there are those who fell through the cracks earlier. And so the building of trust and confidence is a particular area of governance that's important. When people see in Parliament that the electoral reform bills that were debated the other night, and the opposition doesn't worry to stay, not to bring one semicolon, not one colon, not one comment, not one word to amend the electoral reform bills, which they criticized parts of it. And where the leading opposition doesn't stay to make a statement, doesn't stay to participate. this confuses their own membership and certainly makes people feel that what is going on in Parliament, what is going on with the opposition, well, they can decide to dismiss it, but at the same time, it is of concern to all Guyanese when you have an opposition that is irresponsible and is reckless. And so that is a governance issue that will continue to be dealt with over time, and there's no rapid answer to it.
Understood.
You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Understood.
And so these are ongoing issues. The issue of ethnic insecurities that are being played on by the opposition. These are constant governance issues, but there are other governance issues, as you raised earlier, the constitutional reform issues, legislative reform. These are all part of governance issues. Anti-corruption framework, and trying to strengthen our anti-corruption framework, our measures, and to make sure that we have the prosecutorial and investigative capacity, that the judgments in court are timely and don't take forever. I mean, just tonight I saw that the cases that have been brought, the cases against a number of persons to do with electoral fraud, the case management that I met, I think today or yesterday, has put the cases for February 2023. Right. You're talking about, and these are things that are governance issues, because if people feel the system works and they're getting answers and they may not agree with the results, but there is some level of efficiency, not things dragging on. When Minister, no one feels to sit there for a long time.
And go back to Kublal. I'm pretty sure he has.
I have a lot of
questions if we can get them in.
Through this time.
This is a very dense area.
Is the government on course to realize this one Guyana vision? Are you seeing any problem or any encouragement in this vision, One Guyana?
I don't understand your question. You said, is there revision? Is there...
No, is there... government is on this course of this One Guyana vision.
Building a One Guyana, yes.
Vision, yes. What do we call it? One Guyana.
Yes, One Guyana.
Is the government facing any opposition or reluctance or any kind of hindrance in this program of One Guyana?
No, it's rolling on, and people come out to it, and people are part of it. And there are layers of it. There are layers of it. You have the celebration and observance of national days, of Christmas, of religious days, of programs such as Men on Mission, which dealing with domestic violence. Over 1,000 men came out to that, and then every region will develop its own chapter of MOM, or Men on Mission. And when you look at it, these are men of all different colors. And so this is the embryo of One Guyana. The embryo of Guyana is not a catchphrase. It's the demonstration by people that they want to be part of something. They want to celebrate, or they want to discuss, or they want to be part of the movement of this country. They don't want to be isolated. They don't want to be segregated. They don't want people saying, don't go out because you don't mix with Indian people, or you don't go out, you're black, you shouldn't be going out with them. And so One Guyana is an embryo. It's a philosophy of how we are going to move from this One Guyana, One Nation, One Destiny, which is important. That's part of the whole thing. But this is translating that into One Guyana. And so it does mean one nation. It does mean one destiny. It does need one people. And so it's an embryo.
Right.
And it has to develop, and it has to have momentum of its own. And people will be contributing to it in their own ways at different levels. So there's no, how do I say? There's not a book you can receive and find out what One Guyana is. One Guyana is in the making. It's in the making. That's why I said it's an embryo.
Yeah. Minister, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask my colleague for one more question. I know he had a few prepared, but we'll ask just to have one more question, and then we will obviously put it.
I was talking about some of these frameworks. I mean, the constitutional framework that government has introduced. like the anti-corruption framework, the sustainable development framework. Is this thing is functioning very effectively, or are they getting in constraints or in its practice?
Well, the Constitution of Guyana is the supreme law of our country, and it does enshrine human rights. It does enshrine constitutional bodies. Of course, in the 1999-2001 constitutional reform process, in our desire to be able to have greater participation of the opposition and to get them off the streets from being violent, etc., was to have a kind of power sharing when it came to the appointment of constitutional posts, such as the Chancellor and the Justice, such as the such as the service commissions and other post holders. This has been successful and not successful. And many lawyers have written to say that the politicians were a bit crazy to have made these amendments. However, law isn't about being perfect. It's also about dealing with trying to find solutions using law to solve what are other issues. So in the constitutional reform process, we will have to discuss whether that whole theory that came out in 1999-2001 of having a kind of power sharing where the leading opposition had a veto on the president for certain appointments, whether that's something we want to live with it still. But at this point, that's what we have. And therefore, the leading opposition is saying, I'm not dealing with the appointment of the Judicial Service Commission. I'm not dealing with the other service commissions, police and public, because I want to talk about the Chancellor and the Chief Justice. And therefore, if you don't talk about what I want, then I'm not talking with you. And that's what we're down to. So the constitutional reform will take place, and it will be a national issue. In 1999-2001, as in 96, it went throughout the country, and there were public hearings, there were written submissions, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hearings. That model is being put back in place again. We will not do never, ever in the PPPC do a 1980 where no one knew what the Constitution that Burnham brought in looked like. We had a referendum where people asked to support it, to have a new Constitution. No one knew what the thing looked like until in 1980 it came into being. So that's one, Constitutional Reform Commission. In terms of anti-corruption, the efforts that Guyana is making are quite amazing in terms of the statutory bodies and constitutional bodies that oversight our anti-corruption measures. Issues of strengthening them, of course, but the fact that you have more charges by SOCU, by charges against those who are involved with corruption or bribery and so on, including even beat police, is there on record. And what was the third one? I forgot.
Well, you got committee of appointment, the human rights issues, committee of human rights issues. And those are not constitutional framework that was created to function.
Yeah, the committee of appointment is a parliamentary committee that is enshrined in the Constitution, but it's a parliamentary committee. I chair it. And we have finished doing the consultative process for the nominees to the Ethnic Relations Commission and to the Women and Gender Equality Commission. To go to Parliament, to begin the process of consultation with civil society, we have to have a 2/3 majority, which we achieved when it came to ERC, so we could consult. We now have all the nominees for the ERC. We have to return to Parliament and get Parliament to adopt those names with a simple majority. Same thing with the Women and Gender. The next two, one is before the Parliament, waiting for the 2/3 majority, but unfortunately, the opposition has been in minority for the last two sittings, and so we cannot put the motion on the floor because it requires a 2/3 majority, which is 43 people, and their numbers have not allowed us to have the 43 people. The IPC, same thing. So the Rights Commissions, the Committee of Appointment is doing its work, but it has to go through the constitutional requirements.
Minister Gail, thank you so much for all of those commentaries. And I think this demonstrates we have really, major topics to discuss that will require us to ask you to come again. But I'll turn you over to my host, Shaniza, to ask some questions from the audience.
Sure. Wow. I wish we didn't have a time limit on this because, I would love for this to continue. Gentlemen, you've done an amazing job tonight. The passion in the room was definitely felt, Mr. Kublal, and you guys definitely brought on, some important discussions. And I'm so grateful for all our viewers who are here with their positive comments. And so we'll take a few questions from our viewers and then we'll wrap the show up. Kev Samaru is from Toronto, Canada, and he's asking, will the PPP government able to resurrect the 5-month loss after the March 2nd, 2020 general and regional elections? Minister?
I think we did that. I mean, we did that because we came out of the August the 2nd and we haven't stopped running, and the country is basically being put back on its feet, and our people are back to normal within a short time from us getting elected. So yes, of course, there's the damage of basically what the PNC did, but it hasn't stopped us. And so I think we're gone beyond that now. We're on a much different road that's going much faster and higher than if we had stayed back in 2020.
Perfect, thank you. And Soma Bpath asked, what will be the outcome of the people who were summoned to testify and pleaded the fifth?
I cannot answer. That's a commission of inquiry, and the jurists who are there. This is an independent body, and I'm not a judge, but the judge will, the jurists who are in the commission of inquiry will have to deal with that. But the court rejected the request for an injunction of the COI, and so we'll see what happens. And also I heard, I don't know the amount, unfortunately, I didn't get to find out before I came here, and that was that the judge actually put charges, cost, actually put cost for those who are bringing it, and kind of wasting the court's time. So we'll see what happens. There are many people still to come before the COI, and as I said, every day you learn something a little bit new when you thought you knew a lot that happened in 2020.
Perfect. Hansraj Prasad is asking if you can tell the listening audience. Wait.
COI.
Riggers will go to jail. Well,
from the COI.
Yeah, it's from the COI as well. I think you pretty much answered that one already.
But also some of them are before the court now.
Right.
Unfortunately, it seems to take a while.
Ramona Kareem is asking, she says she followed the distributions of house lots and would like the statistics for ethnic groups.
Well, we don't collect ethnic data, not in the employment in the public service, not for applications of house lots, not for applications for driver's license or firearms or NIS. But I would advise her, just take a look through the newspapers or the footage of wherever there have been distribution of house lots, and she will be able to answer it herself just from pictorially. If you obviously go to Region 2, which is majority Indian, you may see majority Indian, but you will not see exclusively Indian. If you go to Region 10, where house lots are distributed, you will see majority Afro-Guyanese, but not exclusively. If you go to Region 9, majority Amerindian, you will see large percentage of Amerindian, but also other ethnic groups. So whilst the data is not available, and the data in terms of numbers of house lots being given out by region is available, just look at the media coverage of every one of the distribution, and you'll see in there whether it is cane farmers, because people think cane farmers are all one ethnic group. Not so. People think fishermen are all one ethnic. Not so. People think miners are all one ethnic group. Not so. So we have to disavow ourselves of these ethnic boxes we ourselves put people in, instead of recognizing Guyana is way beyond that, has moved past the 1950s a long time ago. And so the ethnic figures are not available because we don't collect them. But you can look at the coverage. In the last few weeks, there have been distribution in Mahaika, Maikoni, Region 2, Region 9. different areas, and so you can see that. But what she may be proud of, and I am as a Guyanese woman, is that 44% of all the house lots given out in 2021 and 2022, 44% are Guyanese women.
Very proud of that.
And over 70% of Guyanese women are in the training programs, whether it is Goal, whether it is Grow. We women ain't getting left behind, darling. We ain't watching ethnic figures. We ain't watching ethnic figures. We just want to get on. We want to do well. We want to have our houses. We want to have our men. And if they don't behave well, we throw them out. But we want to have our houses. We want our children to be educated. We want to have our transportation and one day own a car. We are ambitious. And we ain't taking no more nonsense. And so if we want to get stuck in this ethnic pole, we lose the value of what is going on, where there's Guyanese women are becoming a property class. And in fact, this data that came out of the Ibero Barometer a couple of years ago was that Guyana had a large percentage, larger than any other Latin American Caribbean country, of women who owned property. In other words, owned land. They got collateral. And it doesn't mean hundreds of acres of land. A house lot is land. And that is collateral, and that is power, and that is security. So we should start turning the prism a bit.
Right.
We sure should. And you've heard from the Honorable Minister. There were some very kind comments about your service to our beautiful country, Minister. I hope you have the opportunity to go back and read them. Very kind comments about you and who you are. We thank you for everything that you've done for our beautiful country. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here this evening. To Mr. Kublal and to Mahendra, thank you guys so much. Minister, truly an honor to have you here and looking forward to having you back on the Guyana Dialogue. Until next time, this is the Guyana Dialogue. I'm your hostess, Shamisa Ali. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Thank you for being so kind. Bye-bye.
We can move it by.